¿No vamos a jugar en el 43?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Photogtalk. This is the second video of this podcast, if you don't count episode 0, which is kind of like the beta test, the initial testing grounds of this podcast, where I interviewed Kevin Takami. Episode 1, we just kind of talked about photography in general. We talked about new releases of new cameras, like the new Fuji camera that just came out recently. And today, we're going to have a legitimate, real topic that's kind of, you could say, been on my mind for a few years. And I decided to make a podcast episode about it when I was reminded about it by my significant other, my girlfriend. She said it would make a very interesting podcast episode. And that being the topic of ethics and morality when it comes to street photography. Is street photography an ethical decision when going into photography? Is it even like an ethical form of art? And that's what we're going to be going into today. But before we even start about the ethicality or the morality of street photography, we got to really understand what street photography is for those who don't know. We're just kind of brush up on it for those who already know and are just kind of listening for something to listen to. Street photography wasn't really a thing about 100 years ago, but until the 1930s when Cartier-Bresson, I guess you could say the godfather of street photography, kind of made it a big deal. He made it a big thing. Even today, his photos are still studied for good reason. I mean, this gentleman has everything behind his photos. You study it and you understand composition, you understand lighting. This was a time before color photos, so all you really have to do is focus on your composition, your exposure, your white balance. This gentleman, Cartier-Bresson, I mean, got everything down before there was even a rule set for street photography. I mean, he said it as simple as that. He was the one who laid the groundwork for people in the future, for people like me or for other photographers. And what Mr. Bresson did was kind of laid groundwork for other influential street photographers like Vivian Maier, who is also absolutely phenomenal, a woman who was active, I'd say in the 40s, taking incredible photos, mainly taking photos for herself. I mean, just finding interesting subjects, taking it, and never really sharing it with anybody. That's what makes her so interesting, at least to me, that she just used street photography as, I guess, a way to pass the time. And for a lot of people, that's really what it was. Just finding an interesting subject, taking a photo of it, and I mean, just looking at the photo and hanging it up on your wall, putting it on your archives. Man, I don't know why that word was so hard for me to say. We're just enjoying the photo, But it wasn't really until people started realizing that, hey, street photography is not only interesting, fun to do, but you can also monetize it. Take in Robert Frank, who is also a super influential photographer, especially to me. I love Robert Frank. Robert Frank is very well known, especially with his book, The Americans. I highly recommend you look him up. See, Robert Frank is a master. I would like to say he's a little better than Cartier-Bresson, in my opinion. And that's just because, I love the dude. Robert Frank has one of the best photo books of all time called The Americans, where he basically just goes around and taking photos of Americans, and he becomes uberly popular doing this. And I don't know how much money he's made from his books for his publication. Maybe he's made a lot, maybe he hasn't made too much. But nonetheless, it is one of the most popular street photography books out there, point blank period. It's probably one of the only ones that photographers, even if they're not street photographers, can list off the top of their head. Oh, street photographer, oh, the Americans, Robert Frank. Now these photographers from the like early 30s up into the 50s were still kind of experimenting. They were just kind of going around town taking photos of people, getting interesting compositions, just like Vivian Maier, just kind of doing what they really wanted to do, just having fun with it. It wasn't until, like, I would say after Robert Frank released The Americans, when people were kind of going crazy with street photography. You have people like Bruce Gilden, who I will bring up a little later in this episode of this podcast, where they kind of go crazy to the point where it could be an annoyance. I don't think Bruce Gilden in himself is an annoying person. I mean, the dude doesn't know me. I don't know him personally, whatever. But this guy, his sense of photography is extremely different. Where Robert Frank or Cartier-Bresson just kind of stay in the background. More Cartier-Bresson, where he's almost like a ghost in some of his photos, where he's kind of taking photos a little further back and letting things play out. And Robert Frank kind of being part of, I wouldn't say the situation, but kind of part of the scene, where he's clearly there. Same with William Klein, another great photographer, my favorite, where they're kind of just part of the scene and they just kind of have a camera there, as opposed to being away from the scene. Now, Bruce Gilden is making the scene. For an example, in the 80s, I think that you might find a video of him doing it, is that he would go around like Times Square or somewhere around New York, and he'll have a flash in his left hand and then his camera in the right hand, or vice versa. He's walking down the street and he'll point the flash at a pedestrian's face, go off. Of course, the pedestrian is like a deer in headlights, almost like, oh my God, what the hell's happening? And then Bruce Gilden just kind of, hey, cheese, takes a photo of them and walks away. And of course, some people didn't take lightly to it. They will like cuss him out. And then Bruce Gilden, being Bruce Gilden, is a very brash person, very funny. He's just like, fucking deal with it. Who cares? It's what I do. Surprised he hasn't been in like a documented fight, which is kind of funny, But that style of photography from Cartier-Bresson, Vivian Maier, Robert Frank, Bruce Gilden, William Klein have all in turn affected your favorite YouTubers. Yeah, woo! Like Sean Tucker, Chudley, who kind of make a living off street photography. Sean Tucker being one of them. Great YouTuber. I consider him more of a photographer than a YouTuber, but he's active on social media, active on YouTube all the time. So he's a YouTuber. Where they kind of, I wouldn't say make situations like Bruce Gilden does, but they're a part of them, like Robert Frank, where they're just kind of in it. And street photography has just become that popular where now you have content on YouTube constantly. This isn't the time where Robert Frank, where some person releases a book and everyone thinks, oh man, this is incredible, it's street photography. Wow. Or Bruce Gilden, where it's so brash and in your face, where you're like, I have to pay attention to this now. No, street photography now is kind of like a given. It's just another form of photography, like next to portraiture or next to landscape. It's just there. And people are going crazy for it. At least from like 2016 to now, it seems like there's been a huge rise. So much so that there's like how-to videos on street photography. There's a YouTuber, Jay Regular. He has a video on like what is needed in street photography, like what you might need. And it's kind of crazy to think that there's videos like that when, as opposed to like the 1930s or 1950s, where all you really needed was just a camera and like, I don't know, just like a little bit of conviction to go outside and like, hey, I want to take photos of random people today. I'm going to take photos of random events. Now you have to have the newest equipment. You have to have the GoPro strapped to your camera to film the photos that you're about to take, because how else are you going to make content for YouTube? It's preposterous. Robert Frank should have been learning this. Robert Frank should have been listening to Jay Regular's videos. I don't know why he wasn't. Maybe he would have been a better photographer. Maybe the Americans would have had a part 2. Imagine the Americans part 2 book because Jay Regular told them he wasn't doing it right. But that's not a shot at Jay Regular. Dude doesn't know me. I don't know the guy. He's actually a really good YouTuber. I recommend you watch him. But I just wanted to paint a picture of how insane street photography has gone these past few years. You're having how-to videos. You're having countless photographers consider themselves street photographers or consider it a big part of what they do. And spoiler alert, I am one of them. I love street photography. And shit, I mean, I listen to those how-to videos too because I'm like, what is the best exposure for a certain times of day when I'm taking photos out in the street? Specifically, like if I'm in Tokyo. I've only really been in Tokyo once, but Tokyo has very interesting architecture to the point where you're almost always in the shade in the summer. So there's a lot of YouTubers who kind of, quote unquote, specialize in taking photos in Japan. And they're like, oh, well, you're going to always have harsh photos when it comes to street photography in Japan. And you need to watch out for this. And it's absurd, but useful. And I think it's pretty interesting. But now that we kind of gotten a picture of what street photography was and how it is treated now, let's kind of jump into the ethics of it. If it's actually ethical to be a street photographer or to partake in street photography, or the morality of it in general. Now, I want you to think about this for yourself. You're chilling out, middle of the street, downtown, I would say evening, just having fun. You're probably there. You're probably out with your friends. You're probably going to go out drinking. You're probably just going to go out to a party. Who cares? You're just having fun. And all of a sudden, a random guy comes up to you with a camera. I was about to cuss it. With a camera strapped with a GoPro on top. He listened to the most recent Jay Regular video, and he realized, I am a street photographer now. I'm going to take photos of people. And he comes up to you, flashes a camera in your face. He doesn't think that you see, and he takes like 6 photos of you seemingly doing nothing, just hanging out with your buddies. How would you react to that? Me, I would be a little questionable about it, even though I am a photographer. Maybe this guy's a creep. Maybe he just wants to take pictures of me because I'm so handsome, or he wants to take pictures of the person next to me because they're so beautiful. And he wants to do something with those photos that shouldn't be said in this podcast, but he is just a questionable person. And you might approach them. You might say, hey, what is this for? And he'll say, oh, it's for photography, yada, yada, yada. How would you feel? I'm guessing you would probably feel, like I said, a little negative, a little concerned. But does that inherently mean that that should be like a bad thing? Look, street photography isn't illegal, at least in the United States of America. For the most part, it's not illegal. It's kind of protected under the freedom of speech. You could go out in a public place and take photos. That is, without a doubt, not illegal. It's just kind of a question of if it's okay with a person's privacy. And I say yes and no. Yes and no. If I'm in a public place and I take a photo of like a scene of people, and I'm not necessarily taking a photo of a specific person, then it should be okay. You're just kind of enjoying an event. Like take, for instance, Fiesta in San Antonio. Everybody's dressed up in bright, beautiful colors. Everyone's kind of experiencing this culture, experiencing the Mexican culture, Hispanic culture. And, people are taking photos and one person's like, hey, that person like 9 yards away took a photo in my general direction. That's absurd. I hate that. I don't think that's unethical at all. I think that's just kind of like a normal photo. I think people might be a little intimidated by like a DSLR or like an actual camera. And so they think, hey, what is this for? This might be for like media. I don't want to be in media. When in reality, it's just for some guy's like YouTube channel, or it could just be for some person's Instagram page. I don't think that's unethical. What I do think is unethical is taking street photography photos knowing that a person is going through something and kind of benefiting off of it. So what I see, or what I've seen recently of like people starting with street photography, is they go up to like homeless people who are like sleeping on the side of the street, or they're minding their own business, and they don't look like they're the happiest people. And the street photographer sticks a camera in their face and is like, wow, look at this. This is incredible. This is like a never before seen thing. A homeless person. Let me take a photo for YouTube. Let me take a photo for Instagram. I think that's unethical. I think that's bullshit. You shouldn't be doing that. That's kind of like, that's disgusting. You know, if I was sleeping and someone like, it's like middle school shit. If I'm spending the night over at my friend's house and I'm sleeping and he starts taking photos of me while I'm asleep to like spook me when I wake up, then like, what the fuck are you doing? But in reality, these are just homeless people minding their own business. I think that's unethical. Now, if you're just a random Joe Schmo walking down the street and for some reason the lighting looks perfect, the buildings look interesting, and something's kind of going on, or like, you know, the whole scenario looks good, and a guy takes a photo in your general direction, I don't think that's much of a big deal. And like I said, that's not really unethical, or is it illegal? I do want to touch on the fact that in Texas, according to expertphotography.com, it is technically illegal to be a street photographer. And I quote, in Texas, there was an improper photography statute. This law makes it illegal to photograph a subject without their consent, but it's with intent to arouse or gratify the sexual desire of any person. So you can still take photos of people as long as you're not touching yourself to that photo, if it's not like a weird fetish thing. So if I see like a dude on the side of the street, or I see a woman on the side of the street, and I like take a photo of him because I want to like, you know, do things to that photo, well, yeah, that's illegal. But if you just take a photo, and also like disgusting and weird, you shouldn't be doing that. But if you're taking a photo just because you just want to take a photo for your portfolio, you're just kind of practicing, I mean, fuck it, whatever, go for it. That's what I think. In general, I just don't think this is a questionable thing whatsoever. It should be protected under the First Amendment, and it also should be protected as an art form. A personal story of mine, I think this was about like 2 years ago. I was walking downtown and I was taking photos I was taking photos of Fiesta, and I was going up to people, I was taking photos, and 90% of the time they enjoyed it. They had no problem. As a matter of fact, a lot of people wanted me to take photos of them, and I happily obliged. No one had a problem with it. The other 10% just didn't seem to care. They didn't approach me. They didn't tell me off. They were just kind of neutral with it. But 90% of the time, a lot of people saw me with the camera and they'll like wave or they'll smile because it's an interesting event. Police officers will smile and wave. People who kind of ride the horses smile and wave. Attendees smile and wave. People who in San Antonio, if you've never been to San Antonio, there's this big river walk. It's beautiful. Sometimes it's kind of like a green sludge of a river, but they have these boat captains, and these captains wear these bright blue uniforms with like these red pants, and they sail their little tourist ships down the river, and they give commentary about, hey, this is the Alamo, is like 2 blocks away. This is like a famous restaurant here. This is Rainforest Cafe, whatever. One of them saw me take a picture of him. He waves his hand, he's smiling, he's waving. Some people even see you with a camera and they think it's for something interesting, and they're like, oh my god, over here, oh my god, take a photo of me, take a video of me. And then you have to explain to them, hey, this is for nothing specific, this is just for like YouTube. Now that we've kind of, or at least I kind of decided that I believe street photography isn't unethical. I mean, if you disagree with me, please let me know. I would love to hear your opinion. Just for the most part, I don't believe it's unethical unless you're not exploiting somebody's misadventures or unfortunate event. You're exploiting somebody is what I'm trying to say. That is unethical. Now, I want to also kind of piggyback off that and say, is profiting on street photography unethical in and of itself? I mentioned previously, Robert Frank has a very popular book called The Americans, which is just a beautiful, beautiful book of photos he'd taken around America of just normal citizens. I mean, it's an influential book. I don't know how much money he made off of it, so I can't say, oh my god, this made him rich. But for a book being that influential, he's had to have made at least somewhat of a profit. Now, is profiting off street photography unethical? That is also a hard question. I want to say no, just for the fact that for the most part, when people take photos of street photography, it's for themselves. They just want to share the interesting event with people, or in Vivian's Meyer case, she just took photos just because she just wanted to. But there might be a few people out there who take street photography photos knowing beforehand that they're going to make a profit off a book or Zine or whatever. That I think might be unethical, because it's almost like the street photographer who takes photos of homeless people just because he finds it an interesting subject that this person is suffering. So he or she has to take a photo of a person suffering to have an interesting composition, to have an interesting subject. It's the same thing. You're kind of exploiting people for your own gain, because you know that if you might take a good photo, or if you take enough good photos to compile it in a book, you're making money off those people without them knowing. Again, it's so hard to determine if it's unethical or not, because me myself, if I can make money doing what I love, taking photos, street photography, God, I would love to do it. But does Joe Schmo on the street want his photo taken and make the person that took his photo without him knowing like thousands of dollars? Probably not. Let's be honest, probably not. He wouldn't want that to happen. And now we're seeing YouTubers, we're seeing new photographers come out with tons and tons and tons of zines, photography books of street photography. And I find it interesting that usually when you work with a model, you have to have like a model release form. Hey, I promise not to do this to your photos. I promise not to use your photos in this specific way. But when it comes to street photography, you don't need anything, because it's public domain technically. But and public domain is free range in a lot of photographers' minds. But does that constitute like, hey, because everything's free range, I can make moolah off of it? I don't know, because I'm thrown between both of them. I believe photographers should be paid for what they do. Sometimes we don't get paid as much as we should, and so we look at different avenues like artistic expression, making big prints, or making books. So it's hard to understand that. And I want to use another photographer as an example, Tetsuo Suzuki, who is a incredible photographer. I've been following his work for the past like 6 or 7 years. I think he is a part of Void Tokyo. If you heard of them, they're kind of like a collective. It's like Magnum Photos, but just not as selective. Magnum Photos, if you know what that is, it's like the Illuminati, the Freemasons of photographers. Not really, but they're just like a very highly selective club, and they only pick the best of the best for them to be a part of Magnum Photos. Void Tokyo is kind of like another photography collective. Now, Tetsuo Suzuki is part of this photography collective. So are many other street photographers. I just want to point out Tetsuo Suzuki because he's my personal favorite. But he takes brilliant photos. Brilliant. He also crosses the line. He takes photos of homeless people sometimes, which I don't really necessarily agree with. Or he'll take photos of people kind of going through something, which I also don't really agree with, unless that suffering is like a noteworthy event. I'll get that covered in a little bit. But he just takes photos of people, and he has like numerous books of just that, just random people out on the street of Tokyo, in Europe, just all over the world, just wherever he visits, he takes photos. And his books sell out. I mean, God, they're like hotcakes. He puts them out in the market on his website. Within like a few weeks, they're done. They are completely sold out, and for good reason. This guy is a genius. But he's clearly taken photos of people who like don't want their photo to be taken, because you could see it in some of the videos that he's been a part of on like other YouTube's channels, and he kind of like the camera follows him around, is taking photos of people, and it shows the photo, and some people are like covering the camera, or some people are like looking at him with like a dead stare. And he just kind of he doesn't do the Bruce Gilden thing where he's like, "I fucking deal with it." He just kind of like says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then walks away. As much, who knows? I don't know if that's ethical or not. give me your opinion. I would want to see what y'all think about. I'm kind of leaning towards like unethical, just for the fact that it's like kind of exploitive, but I don't want it to be unethical because shit, it's money. But does money have a say over people's privacy? As an American, I don't believe it does because I think privacy should be a right. But like, yeah, you know what I mean? It's so hard to say yes or no. I also want to go and like talk about Bruce Gilden. I mentioned like previously, Bruce Gilden also has made a huge following, a huge career off of huge career off of street photography. So much so that his kind of taking photos for brands like Gucci. He's released also numerous photography books. Dude, he is incredible. He is the guy, but he is crude. He's mean. I don't know the guy personally. He's probably like a sweetheart in real life. But like the way he portrays himself in like interviews or like street photography walk videos, dude's kind of an asshole. Like he takes, like I said, he'll like practically flash banging people with his flash and then taking a photo. And then some people are like, they'll kind of give him like an awkward smile, like, "Oh, you just took a photo of me, but I'm a good enough person to kind of like just smile at the photo." And then there's like a part, I remember I saw a video where someone did that and he's like, "Oh, you smiled, you ruined the fucking photo. Thanks." Like he was pissed off that this random person out in public didn't do the thing that he wanted to do for his photo that he was going to publish. So it's like, I don't think that's ethical. I think that's kind of like borderline controlling, because at that point you could go into like portraiture photography or even go into street portraiture, um, which is just asking people out in the street to take their photo of them with like consent beforehand, and then kind of taking a similar street photography type of feeling. I don't think that warrants like any backlash towards Bruce Gilden for what he does. The dude's, like I said, is influential. He's like a top figure in the photography world for street photography. Um, but I just don't think that's like an ethical thing to do. Like if you were to do that, first of all, you're not Bruce Gilden, so don't. But second of all, it's just like come on, it's like it's a public area. It's the same of like, I don't know if you've been on TikTok recently or Instagram Reels. If you're like me and you're getting brain rot looking at these reels of like gym goers like filming themselves at the gym, and like a person walks past them to pick up like a dumbbell, and the influencer like loses their shit because they're like, "You were in my shot," and the other guy's like, "Dude, I'm just here to fucking work out." It's kind of akin to that. Like, I'm just here to walk past the street to get to my job, and you're yelling at me because I smiled in a photo that you took of me that I didn't even want that photo to be taken of regardless. That's what I think is unethical. When you're kind of like bitching, okay, not bitching, but you're kind of like complaining about the fact that like someone didn't akin to what you thought was a good photo at the time, even though you're in public. If you're in private and they've signed like a lease, they've signed a contract, well then yeah, you kind of have a right to be like, "Hey, in this contract I said you could you do whatever I want to take a good photo. You're not doing it. You kind of suck." In public, if you do that, then you're just kind of like a questionable human being. Though I don't know, Bruce Gilden could be an awesome person in real life. I know his work is awesome, so that's what I'm going off of. I'm judging the art rather than the artist, because who knows if he's a good guy or not. And another thing is street photography. Another reason why I believe it should be protected, or a reason why I think it should be protected, is because it's borderline like photojournalism. Um, I I love photojournalism. I am huge. I don't even think you need to defend photojournalism. I was about to say defendant of photojournalism, but I'm a huge advocate for it. Photojournalism could be like, you know, like anything as mundane as like, "Hey, this street is closed. This is the local news. Here's a local photographer taking the photo of the street closure and is putting it on the newest article." Or it could be something as serious as like a person in a war zone actively taking photos and sending them to numerous forms of media, if that be like old dinosaur media like Fox News, CNN, or to like more contemporary media like online. I think that's an extremely important career. I think it's an extremely important form of photography. Basically letting the world know what's going on in a specific area. I believe um, street photography is akin to that because you're kind of documenting what's happening at a certain time at a certain place, even if it isn't that important. You're kind of setting like a point in time. I think that's what photography is all about. You see photos from like the 1940s and 1950s, and people are like, "Oh my God, life used to be so cool. They had really cool cars back then, and the people dressed so different." We would have never known what these people looked like and dressed like if it weren't for photography or any other forms of media like video. And that's why I believe that like taking photos now is akin to that. You know, even taking photos back in like say like 2002, like when people were still taking photos like that in 2002, people back then are like, why are you taking photos now? Like there's nothing interesting to take photos of. And then now when people are like, wow, Y2K is so interesting. Whoa, this person has a Walkman on. Whoa, that's so cool. It's the same deal. Like you're just kind of documenting that point in that specific point in time. Now, if you want to argue that like our society has hit a plateau of like interesting things, like hey, like iPhones have been the same since like the iPhone 10, then you know you can argue that and say that, you know, it's not interesting to see a person walk around with the newest iPhone because in the next 10 years the iPhone's going to look the same. Hey, we fucking thought in 2001 flip phones and BlackBerry were going to be the thing for the rest of our lives, but ended up not. So I do believe that um, photojournalism as well as street photography are to the point super similar, that street photography should be protected and that it shouldn't be considered unethical. You know, like as much as I disagree with a few aspects of it, it should still kind of be considered unethical because you're reporting something. Even if you don't feel like you are, you're still reporting something that may be important in the future, you know, or it might be important to you in the future. Who knows? And that's all that really matters when it comes to photography. Because if you're in photography to make a profit, well, then you're in the wrong career. This isn't for profit. This isn't for, you know, to make money quick. You're in the wrong thing. Go into economics. Go into gambling, you know. You should go to Las Vegas if you want to make money quick because that's the only way you're ever going to do it. Never going to do it with photography. You might be at the right place at the right time and take the right photo and be a multi-millionaire, but 9 times out of 10, mainly like 99.99999% of the time, you're just going to be a normal photographer. And that's okay. I mean, that's perfect. I'm just an ordinary kind of below average to average photographer. And I'm enjoying it. Woo, I'm loving it. I'm loving having to spend thousands of dollars on gear for taking photos that only really I enjoy, and maybe like 60 people on social media and like the 4 people who listen to this. But you know what? I enjoy doing it. And speaking of gear, let's talk about something interesting that just came out recently. The Nikon ZF just released. The Nikon ZF, what people say like a modern camera and a retro style modeling, like Fuji hasn't been doing it for years now. But seriously, it's an impressive camera. It's a full frame camera. So they already got a heads up on Fuji. If you want a Fuji full frame camera, you're going to have to really shell out a lot of money. Nikon ZF, on the other hand, this Nikon camera has the retro styling that a lot of Fujifilm lovers love, like myself, because I prefer the little tactile buttons. You know, I'm a slut for feeling the, I'm a slut for feeling the, you know, all the little settings on the top of the camera. You know, I love it. I love it. I love it. That's why I spend money on it. But the Nikon ZF, on the other hand, has that same quality. And I'm going to be honest with you, for it being a full frame camera, mirrorless, and relatively new, just came out, I would say like as of time of recording this, but like a week or two ago, maybe even less so, only $1,000. Granted, it's a 24 megapixel sensor, which 24 megapixel sensors are nothing to scoff at. I have a camera that's 24 megapixels. That's my main camera. That's my best camera. That's technically my only camera, only digital camera. But it's just industry standard as opposed to the other camera we talked about, that Fuji camera, which was hitting like close to like 100 megapixels. Jesus Christ. It's shoots 4K video. It's okay. It's just a standard camera, but people are making it out to be something incredible just because it has that retro body. Again, I love it. I'm fuck it. I don't want to make it seem like I'm shitting on it because I'm not. I think it's incredible. It looks great, dude. It looks like these old Nikon film cameras. I'm looking at a photo right now. I looked at photos previously, of course, before I made the video. But I'm just re-experiencing how this camera looks, and it looks great. I mean, they've got different colors for it, like it's a damn iPhone. Shit, I've seen like red and green. There's blue, green, black, brown, orange, red. Like shit, they've gone full iPhone on this damn thing. Like, you think you had trouble figuring out which color iPhone you want? You want the red one? You want the green one? You want the pink one? No, now you have to figure out which color camera you want because fuck it, Nikon's thinking 30 steps ahead, and they're getting the hipster market down, just like Fuji did. If I had the finances for this camera, personally, I think I would get it. It looks like it's a pretty decent beginner camera. Excuse me. I didn't want to burp inside the camera. I didn't want to burp inside the mic. 4K video, 24 megapixels, full frame. You get all the access to all the Nikon mount lenses. Can't remember the name off the top of my head. I forgot the mount's proper name, but dude, you're getting a killer camera. $1,000. That's I think last episode I mentioned that it's hard to find a new camera for a relatively good price. This might be it. A new camera, that is. $1,000. Still like a lot of money. I would kind of recommend you wait for the newest generation, even though this one just came out. Who knows if they'll make a new one? But maybe if they do make a new one, if they make like a Nikon ZFF2, then just like buy the old one. Maybe the price will dip like $200-$300. But if you're like really need a new camera, go for this one. I think retro styling cameras are not only cool, but they're kind of useful. They teach you like manual controls without really teaching you. For instance, like film cameras, if you get like one from a specific era, like say 70s, as opposed to one from like the early 2000s, everything's manual. Like everything. You might get lucky. You might get like a Canon automatic from the 80s. That kind of helps you with aperture, helps you with things. Okay, whatever. But what I'm trying to say here is that like it doesn't, like, film cameras don't hold your hand. You screw up on a film photo, you screw up that entire photo. You miss like equivalent of like $1 a photo. You kind of screw that up. With these newer cameras, they teach you, these retro style cameras, they teach you the basics of manual controls, and they hold your hand. You can take as many photos as you want, and you're learning all these manual controls. You're learning about the ISOs on the top and apertures here, and oh shit, everything's manual. It's gonna be the perfect exposure, and you screw up, and you're like, oh fuck, this doesn't look good. We could just take another photo free of charge until you reach that $1,000 pay stub that you bought the thing for. I think it's a good idea. Shit. Maybe I'll sell my Fuji and like save a little more money and buy this Nikon. I shot Nikon not too long ago. It was like a DSLR, kind of like I forgot the model number of it. It was kind of old. It wasn't that great, but I enjoyed it. I mean, shit, Nikon had some fun shit. That concludes this breaking news story of the newest camera that is out right now, which is the Nikon ZF. Buy it or don't. I'm not your dad. Do whatever you want with your money. But in my personal opinion, I think it's a great starter camera, or I think it's a great intermediate camera. And I think you could learn a lot from it. And I think I could learn a lot from it. That's why I kind of want to get it. Or I might stick with my Fuji. Who knows? Now, thank you so much for tuning in to the second episode of Photogtalk. You know, just letting you know, if you're watching in through video or if you're listening through audio, sorry, I'm in a new little area. I'm at a desk now, so I don't look like I was at a communist prison camp, and I also don't look like I was an Amazon shipping warehouse. It actually looks like I kind of look like I'm your dad. I look like I'm like giving you like a life speech. But please, thank you so much for tuning in this time. Please come in next week when we're going to be taking a deep dive about one of my favorite photographers, William Klein. I mentioned him about like once or twice in this episode. We're going to be taking a huge deep dive. We're going to be going through his early life, his personal work, what he did later on in his life, and the legacy he's left for a lot of photographers. And you're going to hear my personal opinion about him, which is actually a relatively great opinion. I think the dude was awesome. But again, thank you so much for joining in. We'll be seeing you next week. This was Photogtalk. I am the host of the show, Eric Trevino. I hope to see you next week when we talk about more camera-related business.